Film is impactful, there's no doubt about that. For the last century, film has evolved from silent to coloured and has become more progressive in our lives and culture. We all have one movie, a motion picture to make you weep, smile and understand, a movie to call your absolute favourite. Because that's what movies do, an art form which plays with your feelings and shapes your mind and identity. And behind every film is a person, a director. A director in charge of every small or big detail you see and hear in a movie. And I don't think there will ever be any other filmmaker out there more influential, more powerful, more technical, more creative, more important than the mind and work of Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick. But who was Kubrick? July 26th, 1928. Stanley Kubrick was born in New York City, Manhattan, and was brought up by his parents Jacob and Sadie Kubrick. Kubrick grew up with his sister Barbara in a wealthy Jewish family. At school, it was discovered Stanley Kubrick had a surprisingly high IQ, but his lack of attendance throughout his school life meant the hopes of higher education wasn't likely. His father, who Kubrick said was his most influential character in his life, taught him the ropes of chess, and at the age of 13, Kubrick was given a Greyflex camera, in which he became obsessed with the art of still photography, which no less was the introduction to capturing film. April 12, 1945, the 32nd President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, dies. America is in grief over the recent news, and Kubrick uses this event to capture the repressed emotion of America in a single picture. A newsagent slumped over the frontline news of the recent death. This photo caught the attention of Look magazine, who not only bought the photo of Kubrick, but hired him for his skills and sharp eye. Around his city, Stanley captured the personality and emotion of New York in the late 1940s, this carving the future for his career from photography to cinematography. When tasked by Look magazine to create a short documentary film, he, with an accompanying person, decided to film a boxing match, this short film being called Day of the Fight, 1951. This created a spark for Stanley Kubrick, and within the same year he quit his job for Look magazine to create another documentary, and another 2 years later. This being The Flying Padre and Seafarers. But like most early filmmakers, short films soon progressed to features, as Kubrick's skill became more advanced. Fear and Desire, 1953. Funded off the back end of his close family, Kubrick's first feature stars a cast of 5 and a crew of 8. The film focuses on a group of soldiers who crash land in enemy territory, depicting hunger, savagery and lust of juvenile foot soldiers. The feature was a commercial flop. However, a couple of critics praised the direction of the film, seeing the capable talent of the director. Kubrick was later embarrassed by the film, and he went out of his way to prevent any future copies and distributions to be made. Killer's Kiss, 1955. Once again with the financial support of his loved ones, Kubrick's second feature is a film noir about a struggling boxer and his relationship with neighbour Gloria Price, who brings trouble in his life. During the filming, Kubrick would collect his unemployment check and would use his skills of chess to win money at high-level street tournaments to fund the picture. In the eyes of Kubrick, this is his first film. The Killing, 1956. With the partnership of Stanley Kubrick and James Harris, Stanley directed The Killing, a heist movie set during a horse racing event. This picture is said to have been Kubrick's breakthrough into cinema and fame. The Killing is regarded as an all-time classic and allowed him to have the respect to venture out for more ambitious projects. Paths of Glory, 1957. Kubrick returns with a war drama epic casting Kirk Douglas as Colonel Dex, who is tasked with the decision to send his troops onto the battlefield knowing not many will make it alive. A decade after World War II, Kubrick decides to create an anti-war drama during the depression of the post-war trauma. Despite its controversy in Europe, Western audiences appreciated the motion picture, and due to the much-loved reception of the film, this established Stanley Kubrick as a household name among growing stars.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Spartacus, 1960. Yet again starring Kirk Douglas in the lead, Spartacus follows the famous story of a gladiator who begins an uprising against the Roman Empire. This was by far Kubrick's biggest film at the time due to the scale of the money involved, the 3-hour running time of the picture, and the overall scope of the film. When it finally was released to the public, the film was granted 4 Academy Awards out of 6 nominations, and to this day manages to be a classic.
Well, why doesn't it kill him? Kill him. Well, what's the matter now? Kill him!
Kill him, you imbecile!
Kill him!
Kill him!
Kill
Lolita, 1962. After the celebrity success of Spartacus, Kubrick decided to take a step back to create a small drama based on the controversial book by the same name, Lolita. Lolita follows Humbert, a professor who gets infatuated by an underage girl. Kubrick had to battle with censorship and hate from the Catholic Church in order to get this film a wide release due to the protagonist being a paedophile. This film established Kubrick as a director with courage, a director at the cutting edge of modern cinema. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, 1964. While the Cold War was taking place and the threat of nuclear destruction was a global fear, Kubrick decides to take this black subject matter and turn it devilishly into a dark comedy. With the comedic actor Peter Sellers multi-rolling 3 different characters, this film manages to have a variety of colourful faces despite it being the darkest of comedies. Dr. Strangelove manages to poke fun at the bleak reality of global annihilation by warheads, a now cult classic from the genius of Kubrick.
Also, when they go down into the mine, everyone will still be alive. There will be no shocking memories, and the prevailing motion will be one of nostalgia for those left behind, combined with a spirit of bold curiosity for the adventure ahead.
2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. During the peak excitement of the space race, Kubrick teamed up with science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke to celebrate and embody the future of space travel. Starting with the evolution of man to the ascension of the human race, Kubrick created a film which exceeds any expectations and shows you an experience of awe and imagination. 2001 A Space Odyssey is regarded as the best science fiction film ever conceived and arguably is one of the best crafted movies ever made. This movie perfectly shows the impressiveness and masterful directing abilities of Stanley Kubrick. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Based upon the infamous book by the same name, A Clockwork Orange is a dystopian crime drama which follows Alex, a gang member who loves ultra-violence as well as classical symphonies by Beethoven. Including graphic scenes of sexual assault and brutal violence, Kubrick forces us to watch this young charismatic rebel and his journey from freedom to machine. With a synthetic, futuristic backdrop and unusual quirky dialogue, Kubrick takes all the elements from the book and bleeds it into the art of film to create the masterpiece that is A Clockwork Orange.
Sin? What's all this about sin?
Barry Lyndon, 1975. Kubrick, instead of looking to the future for his next motion picture, decided to take a glimpse into the past with the historical period piece epic named Barry Lyndon. Watch the chronicles of the life of Barry Lyndon, an Irish social climber who travels across Europe to become rich and powerful, along the way becoming a war hero, a gambler, a criminal, and a father. Kubrick allows us to step into the past of the 19th century. This period drama manages to capture the beauty and harshness of the time through a single man's life.
Gentlemen, aim your pistols. One, two, three.
The Shining, 1980. Credited as Kubrick's most well-known film, The Shining shows the horrific experience of Jack Torrance and his family as he is paid to caretake over the empty and sinister Overlook Hotel through the lonely winter. Today the film still frightens audiences, and its peculiar ending has been debated for decades since its release. The Shining is a staple of classic horror and is still prevalent in today's circulation of popular culture. Full Metal Jacket, 1987. This two-part Vietnam War epic shows the realism and brutality of not only the battlefield but also the gritty truth of boot camp. Kubrick examines the effects of trainee soldiers into war machines, all with the set piece of war-driven Vietnam. Full Metal Jacket holds up for its realistic perspective of the war and is beloved by critics and audience members alike, making this war drama a masterful classic. Eyes Wide Shut, 1999. Starring celebrity couple at the time Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, Kubrick directs a dreamlike experience which exposes the diverse differences of love between men and women. With adult scenes of almost pornographic nature, the film broadcasts many themes while being an interesting journey from start to end. Follow Dr. Bill around the city lights of New York as he tries to have a sexual experience out of jealousy of his wife. This film has polarised critics and has received some mixed ratings due to its mysterious and unexplained scenes and questions. However, tragically, this film managed to be Kubrick's last, as after 6 days of showing the final cut for studio viewing, he died of a stroke in his sleep. Nevertheless, many people were in grief about the loss of this revolutionary artist. Although Kubrick's last film is more than 2 decades old, his work is still prevalent in today's popular culture. From the many clips I've shown you from the numerous masterpieces of Kubrick's work, some must have seemed vaguely familiar, as it's certain you've stumbled across his work before. In this new age of entertainment and the internet, Kubrick's work has been credited, whether through internet posts,
Here's Johnny,
your favourite TV show,
here's Johnny, down,
or popular films.
here's Brucey.
It's because Kubrick is an icon in the cinema world, and his successful attempts at making memorable classics means that it's obvious he's still being talked about today and that his work is still seen in today's cycle of pop culture. To show an example of how Kubrick has impacted today, it's important to look at one of his most memorable and iconic movies, 2001, A Space Odyssey. This film has surprisingly influenced a lot of the technology of today, Samsung even accusing Apple of stealing the designs of their iPads from the technology and props of the film, a film made in the late 60s. Also, the film smartly introduced the concept of artificial intelligence, a technology which is prevalent in all our lives. Actually, the whole movie inspired a whole new generation of computer science. So many of the youth who experienced the sci-fi brilliance of 2001 no doubt create the technology of today due to the scale and size of that movie.
It was a universal. Everybody who saw this movie, the youth of the world, all reacted and wanted a computer of some kind, or went into computers. And that is absolutely gospel. I'm not, just telling tales out of school. That is an absolute constant.
And no doubt Kubrick's work has impacted so many lives over the decades, some more than others.
I remember saying, hey, I was walking out and I gave him a kiss and a hug and I said, I love you, Stanley, you know that. And he turned to me and he was just right there and it was just a quiet moment and it was late at night and he said, I love you too. And he said, thank you. And I said, thank you.
For instance, a lot of his cast and crew have mentioned the enormous impact Kubrick has had on their lives after meeting him. However, no one's life has been more affected by Kubrick than Leon Vitali, this person. A person who became friends and later infatuated by Kubrick. When meeting on the set of Barry Lyndon, Leon soon became completely in awe of Kubrick and followed him and assisted him through all his later movies until Kubrick's eventual death.
When somebody would say to Stanley, "I give my right arm to work for you," he would kind of smile, because I actually think he thought, well, why are you lowballing me? What, just the right arm?
So much about Kubrick is fascinating. This is due to the fact that Stanley Kubrick was a mysterious figure through his entire life. Rarely doing press, hiding from the public eye, keeping his feelings vague and obscure, this aura of intrigue he had around him has inspired many different thoughts about him, some which are highly ridiculous. Many conspiracy theorists believe that he is in connection to the faking of the moon landing, saying he was the one directing it. Also, some people believe that his death wasn't a stroke, but in fact a murder. This is because his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, had exploited the underground truth of Hollywood and celebrities. All of this being completely artificial and nonsensical. However, these theories show that many people to this day are trying to uncover the secrets about Kubrick due to his secretive life and work. Whether his work or himself, it's not wrong to say that Kubrick was a monumental person and his impact and legacy can still be seen in today's new world. Although Kubrick has a mass collection of artful films, there are a lot of others which he never managed to make for so many different reasons. He wanted to return to science fiction with his film Artificial Intelligence. However, the idea of making the protagonist entirely CGI was a novelty in the late 80s, therefore the project was abandoned due to Kubrick's ambitions being too great. The project was later given personally to Steven Spielberg and was made into a feature in 2001. Kubrick was also drawn to the idea of making a bibliographic film about Napoleon. He even went so far as to keep a drawer of cards documenting each day of Napoleon's life onto post-it notes. The project was never made due to the lack of funding. Kubrick also attempted to create a film about the Holocaust, but after years of researching the topic, he became too depressed to continue with the film. All these different examples show the passion Kubrick had for making films. His dedication to his craft was so immense that for every successful or unsuccessful project and ambition came years of research and collaboration. He took his craft seriously. Even when shooting films, his precise and determined attitudes came through. Due to numerous stories from numerous Kubrick collaborators, he is now known to have been a perfectionist with his work. He would demand a ridiculous number of takes of specific scenes and force actors to become aggravated with his precise work methods.
This scene between Scatman and Danny Lloyd has acquired almost legendary status. It may be the most number of takes in history for a single close-up, this one. Stanley did 148 takes of a 7-minute scene on this close-up.
Actress Shelley Duvall, who plays Wendy Torrance in The Shining, became incredibly stressed by director Stanley Kubrick to the point of her hair falling out. Kubrick's harsh demands became infamous in Hollywood. For example, set designer Ken Adams, he had a nervous breakdown on set due to the high demands of Kubrick while having to shoot a natural light only scene in Barry Lyndon.
I went back to London, and of course then I cracked up and had some psychiatric treatment in a hospital for some time.
Also, during the shoot of Barry Lyndon, to adapt to certain candlelit scenes, Kubrick had to use NASA-specific design lenses in order to beautifully capture precise lighting scenes.
It's a Mitchell 35mm cinema camera, and Kubrick bought it for Barry Lyndon. And the very specific and important thing he did with it was he wanted to film Barry Lyndon only by natural light, by candlelight. And in order to do that, he needed what we would call very fast lenses. Lenses that could take in tremendous amounts of light and expose them onto the film. These lenses had only been made by NASA.
Kubrick and his team even won the world record for the longest film shoot, as his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, took a total of 452 days to film. Another example of Kubrick's precise methods is the hypnotic Stargate sequence, which features at the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Kubrick demanded his effects team to go over and over this sequence an unhealthy amount of times. Although Kubrick's intense techniques can appear cruel, the perfectionism can be seen in his work. This sequence was not done by computers, but using almost practical and almost magical camera work and clever sets. This sequence looks spectacular due to the repeated hard work of the visual effects team, and is now timeless because of Kubrick's perfectionist style of working. What Kubrick did for film is incomprehensibly grand. Kubrick always wanted to widen the constrictions of cinema to its limit. An example of this would be Kubrick's grandiose science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's important to note that the idea of CGI was a novelty when creating 2001. In fact, computers were just being introduced into the film production, meaning no computers were used during the making of the film. Using fantastical practical effects, convoluted camera trickery and mechanical set design, Kubrick perfectly creates a believable future all within the confinements of the screen. It's also important to note the influential way Kubrick changed the way music was used in film. For his sci-fi classic, Kubrick used classical music opposed to original soundtrack material, something which wasn't popular to do at the time. The way Kubrick used music to juxtapose the actions on screen changed and shaped the new way of using music. For example, using classical symphonies played during violence, childish songs during war-deprived scenes,
Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse,
or using elegant music as backdrop for moving spaceships. Also, for those with a keen eye, Kubrick's influence can be seen in modern day films as well. This is because Kubrick had managed to establish himself as a powerful director, and with every new and old generation of filmmakers, many of them pay homage to the incredible director. Without Kubrick, the landscape of cinema today would be drastically different. To give you an idea, without some of Kubrick's work we wouldn't have Star Wars or Alien. This is because both directors George Lucas and Ridley Scott have opened up about the influence of Kubrick's science fiction extravaganza 2001: A Space Odyssey and its impact and inspiration it had with them as a child. Several other directors have cited that Kubrick was their personal motivation to get into the film industry and begin making art. These directors include Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, Woody Allen, Terry Gilliam, the Coen brothers, Paul Thomas Anderson, Christopher Nolan, David Lynch, George A. Romero, Orson Welles, Akira Kurosawa, and so many more. Although some of these names may appear new to you, it's important to remember that all these directors and so many more have created and changed cinema all in their own way, and all of this can be linked back to the marvel that is Kubrick and his filmography.
Well, let me just say that I don't think there's anybody that hasn't been influenced by Stanley Kubrick. I mean, it's just like, I can't speak for other directors, but it feels like, you know, what he did was kind of a watermark for all of us, just to say, like, this is how you should sort of treat what you do, and this is how you should address it with a kind of attention, compassion.
For the movie The Shining, Kubrick pioneered the technique of Steadicam, an assistant placed on the camera to make shots appear less handheld. And now this technology is used in every film in modern day filmmaking. Because Kubrick stretched the limits of cinema, lots of his work was highly controversial at the time. Paths of Glory was banned in France due to the despicable portrayal of French army in the film. Lolita was held as diabolical by Catholic churches and censorship companies due to the dark subject matter. A Clockwork Orange was banned for several decades in Britain, as it was said the film created a havoc on its release in the UK, some saying the film inspired higher crime rates across England. Eyes Wide Shut caused mass controversy due to its pornographic scenes and exploitative themes. All these examples show that Kubrick didn't care for censorship, he created what he felt was right and what was important to introduce into the world of film. Kubrick's innovation to film as a whole is massively monumental and powerful, a timeless genius who carved the future for cinema. So, should we remember Kubrick? Well, yes, for all these reasons I've presented. His impact of today has shaped the society we live in now. His movies have created new generations of people, and his work has carved a way for technology and entertainment we indulge in. Forgetting Kubrick means we're forgetting the impact he has had on the world around us. His immense resilience and perfectionist methods he used when filmmaking seamlessly shows in his work. Audiences still today are in awe and question his films due to the phenomenal level of detail in each of his motion pictures. The passion and commitment he had for each of his creations show the genius of Kubrick. His perseverance is an inspirational figure to remember. Kubrick has completely changed the idea of cinema. His innovation to film and filmmakers can be seen through the movies of today. Without Kubrick, would cinema be different? Would cinema still have the powerful art form it holds today? Kubrick is entirely one of a kind. There will never be another Kubrick. He has left us with his collection of masterpieces, and it's up to us to continue his legacy and name throughout the rest of time. All I can truly say is watch his classics. Then and only then will you understand why we should remember this man as legendary.
Which, as it happens, reminds me of a conversation I had with Steven Spielberg about what was the most difficult and challenging thing about directing a film. And I believe Steven summed it up about as profoundly as you can. He thought the most difficult and challenging thing about directing a film was getting out of the car. I'm sure you all know the feeling.